A few years ago, Walt Disney Pictures came up with a brand new formula for success. Remake their old animated classics into modern live-action films. Some of these, such as the villain-centric Maleficent or the more grounded Pete's Dragon, take a new perspective on old tales, while others, such as Kenneth Branagh's Cinderella and Jon Favreau's The Jungle Book, splash some new paint on an old story. Of these, the 2017 remake of Beauty and the Beast has been the most commercially successful, but also the most vexing. The updated version, directed by Bill Condon and featuring Emma Watson as Belle and Dan Stevens as the Beast, follows nearly the exact same story as the 1991 animated version, and keeps all of the same songs. But in addition to replacing the predecessor's rich combination of cell and computer animation with gaudy CG, Beauty and the Beast 2017 also adds some more backstory and a handful of songs, ballooning the runtime from 90 minutes to a sluggish 130. But where it suffers aesthetically in comparison to the 1991 original, the 2017 Beauty and the Beast does address and fix some serious thematic problems in the original, providing a much richer worldview for Christians to examine. Hi, my name is Joe George, and you are watching Renewed Mind Movie Talk, a bi-weekly series in which we take a look at a piece of popular culture and examine it through Christian theology. I have to admit, I struggled with this one a bit because I did not like the movie very much. I thought the acting was very poor, the new songs were completely forgettable, and that CG was just obnoxious and gaudy and, quite frankly, could not hold a candle to the original animation.
Candelabra, please. Enormous difference.
I like stories that are trim and lean and well told, and this one is just bloated at 130 minutes. The 90-minute original just told its story directly. The prince gets cursed, he gets turned into a beast. Belle's father wanders into the beast's castle, he gets captured, Belle finds out about it, she goes and takes the place of the father, she stays in the castle until she falls in love with the beast, the curse is lifted, story's over. Nice and direct, no problems, right? Okay, there's a problem, there's a big problem, and that's the issue of the Stockholm Syndrome. As some of you are aware, Stockholm Syndrome is this term that we use when somebody who gets kidnapped falls in love or has some sort of attachment to their kidnapper. It's deeply problematic. And that's kind of what happens in the original version of Beauty and the Beast. We really don't get, outside of a couple of musical numbers, much reason for Belle to love the Beast, and really the issue of him kidnapping her is never addressed. It's just kind of treated as okay because we want the characters to come together. For all of the artlessness in the new version, it does address these issues. It gives the characters extra motivations in a way that totally changes Belle from somebody who just gets captured to somebody who takes active steps to free herself. Furthermore, in doing this, we get to see more than just romantic love in the original. We see different types of love in a way that we can see how love is transformative. And this is going to be useful for Christians when we think about the way that Christ's love can transform the world and establish a better society here on earth. And so that's how we're going to look at Beauty and the Beast. Let's start by taking a look at the various types of love that are at work in the story. Now, both the 1991 original and the 2017 version of Beauty and the Beast open with the same prologue, showing how a vain prince rejected an old woman's request for hospitality because she was ugly. But after revealing herself to be a beautiful enchantress, she puts a curse on the castle, transforming the prince into a beast and locking him in that condition unless he can get someone to love him before the last petal falls on a magical rose. Both movies recognize the near impossibility of this task. After all, who can love a beast? Now, if the curse breaks when Belle falls in romantic love with the beast, that raises some questions. Did the enchantress expect romantic love from the beast? Is that what she was asking for at that time? I don't think so. And I especially don't think so with the 2017 version. But she is asking for some type of love, but it's not the same type of love that Belle has for Beast, and it's certainly not the same type of love that Belle has for her father, and despite what some conservative internet commenters might say, it's not the type of love that LeFou has for Gaston. There are different types of love at work. As I'm sure you probably know, classical Greek has 4 different terms for love, and I think it's going to be useful for us to use here in order to make sense of what's going on. The most obvious is Eros, which is romantic or sexual love. There's storge, which is familial love, philia, which is strong friendship, and agape, which is unconditional love. Now we see all four in Beauty and the Beast. Again, we see storge between Belle and her father. That's the reason that she gives herself up for the father. We see philia between LeFou and Gaston, really the song Gaston, that's all that that's about. But the most prominent are Eros and Agape, and those are the two that we're going to look at in this video. Eros is the one that jumps right out to us, and that makes sense because this is a romance story. Now, romance stories are often kind of poo-pooed by modern audiences. It really is kind of on the same level as a horror movie in a lot of ways, in which critics kind of turn up their noses and people look down on people who like romance stories. But actually, romance stories have a long history in Western literature, one that dates back before film, before even the invention of the novel, going back to the eras when drama and theater are the prominent forms of literature. Anybody who's taken a Shakespeare class knows that there are really three genres of classical drama. You've got your histories, which tell real stories, but then we also have tragedies and comedies. A tragedy, as the old Shakespeare joke goes, is a story in which everybody dies, in which a good person makes some sort of mistake or gets undone by their own greatness, and not only do they fall apart, but all of society falls apart and everybody dies. In those stories, in those tragedies, the audience is left feeling hopeless. There's that sort of nihilism that Nietzsche talks about, where we're just overcome and thinking, can nothing save us? Everybody is going to fall apart. Once we understand that, we get a better sense of what a comedy is to classical audiences. It's not the way that we think of a comedy, in that it's funny. Rather, it's a comedy because it ends with a marriage. And this is important because a lot of the same things happen in a comedy that happen in a tragedy. In a comedy, a powerful person or a good person can make a mistake. In a comedy, things can fall apart. Take Midsummer Night's Dream. What happens in that? Well, society certainly falls apart. We've got a war in the fairy world. We've got pairs of lovers who run into the woods and they fall in love with the wrong people. We've got a theater troupe that goes through and one of the actors' head is replaced with that of a donkey. Everything falls apart until the end. And people come out of the woods and they're back with the right couples that they need to be, and to commemorate this, it ends in a marriage. See, a classical comedy is a story that ends with a marriage, and that's so important because unlike a tragedy, we're not supposed to think that society has fallen apart. We're supposed to think that society has been put through its paces and kind of reshaped, but when we see the comedy, or when we see the marriage rather, we know everything's okay. Everybody's back where they belong. Beauty and the Beast follows along in that tradition even more than you would think, because obviously, the enchanted people want there to be a marriage at the end. They're not who they're supposed to be. They've been cursed. And unless the Beast and Belle fall in love with one another, that curse is never going to break. So they're constantly pushing for that.
But if this girl is the one who can break the spell, then maybe you could stop by using dinner to charm her.
But more so than in the 1991 version, the 2017 Beauty and the Beast takes it slow. It allows us to see why Belle and the Beast are attracted to one another. We see that the two have a shared love of books, that some sort of friendly camaraderie and even partnership develops between them.
You have to help me. You have to stand.
More importantly, though, they both have outsider status, which is really explained in Belle's case in the song Belle, in which she complains about being part of this provincial life. In the original version of that song, Belle is just kind of this flighty outsider, and we do get parts of that here. But even more so in this version, in the 2017 version, there's a sense that Belle is messing up society. She's not fitting the role that they've laid out for her, and therefore that creates trouble for other people. We see that most clearly in this scene, in which she creates a proto-washing machine so a little girl can learn how to read, which the headmaster responds to with violence. Belle is shaking up the order of things. She's messing up everybody's roles by refusing to stay in hers. We see the response to this most clearly in Gaston, who is the chief antagonist in the movie and really Belle's other rival for her affections, and that way kind of serving as a foil for the Beast. Gaston thinks he deserves Belle's affection because he is attractive in the normative sense of the word. He's the paragon of the villager's standards and thus forces those standards on everyone else because it behooves him. Notice the way that he talks about Belle as a prize, as a reward that he deserves for being the standard of normal. Notice the violent hunting rhetoric that he uses when he describes his pursuit of her.
It's the ones who play hard to get that are always the sweetest prey.
And when she refuses him, listen to how he responds. First with somewhat passive threats.
Do you know what happens to spinsters in this village after their fathers die?
Coins? Got any spare coins?
They beg for scraps like poor Agape.
And then more active and aggressive. The Beast and Gaston are exact opposites of one another. Where the Beast we find is beautiful on the inside and ugly on the outside, Gaston is beautiful on the outside but ugly on the inside. And that gives a lot of weight to their ultimate acts of Eros. When Gaston tries to prove to Belle his love, or why he deserves her, he's doing it in a violent way and trying to push her into a role. She needs to be married to him, and she needs to be having his babies. When Beast does his act of Eros, it's the opposite. He's not pushing her into a role. He's setting her free.
Then you must go to him.
What did you say?
You must go to him.
Now, in the 1991 original, Beast's move here isn't really all that impressive. I mean, after all he's doing is saying, "You're no longer my captive," which, that's not great, because first of all, he should have never captured her, and second of all, he's only letting her go so she can go care for her sick father. That's like baseline good personality. That's nothing particularly impressive. But when we look at the way that Gaston and the villagers have hoisted their expectations on Belle, when we look at the way that Lumiere and Cogsworth and the other castle creatures have been pushing her to play the role of this love-struck princess, when you consider that the Beast needs romantic love from her in order to be transformed back into a prince, then his setting her free becomes far more powerful. The Beast is not just setting her free from captivity, he's setting her free from all of the expectations that are hoisted upon her. He's telling her she can be the person that she needs to be, that she's supposed to be. He's setting her free to be herself. This is a different type of love. This is not just Eros or romantic love. Now we're heading towards agape love, the love for somebody else on the grounds of who they are, regardless of how it helps us. Again, in the 1991 version of the story, the Beast captures Belle's father, and then he keeps her in place of him, and she stays until she falls in love. But this plays out very differently in the 2017 version. She takes the father's place again, but she immediately tries to escape, and we see several escape attempts. When she decides to stay, it's not because of Eros, it's because of agape. We get this scene in which Belle finds out what happened to the castle inhabitants and to the Beast. She finds out that he was raised by a cruel father who twisted him into something awful, even before the transformation into a beast. Mrs. Potts, voiced by Emma Thompson, recognizes the complicity of the castle figure, while also insisting that there's still some good in him. Belle stays to help recover that goodness, to undo the deforming and scarring that he's been through. And she does so before any sort of romantic love is set in, when there's no expectation that she's going to fall in love with him, except for on the part of us as the viewers and the various castle creatures who are trying to push them together. She's doing this simply out of a love for the person that he could be, for his own good, not for her own sake. This is a very different type of Belle, where in the 1991 version, Belle was a captor. Here, she is an actor. Here, she is a hero. Here, she is taking positive steps to save him, to transform him. Here, the love, the agape love, becomes particularly powerful. This, along with the other context of the 2017 movie, reframes the act of inhospitality that sets off the film and transformed the prince into a beast. It's not just that the hag was ugly and the prince was beautiful, not just that he couldn't see her for what she was, it's that he couldn't approach the woman as a means to herself. He, as a powerful prince, had carte blanche to do what he wanted and expelled the woman, only to discover another power at work, a greater power than whatever the prince held. The act of transformation, then, not only reveals the prince's power to be petty, it reveals it to be beast-like. And when we put that in the context of seeing what Gaston has been trying to do throughout the entire movie, and the villagers as well, we come to understand that this beast-like power is not unique just to the prince, it's the way of the world. And so when we think about the way that Belle's love for the beast transforms him and the castle back to what they're supposed to be, and we think about that in terms of what classical comedy does, reestablishing society, then we see just how powerful Belle actually is. She's created a different type of society, a new society, a better society. And while it is ultimately Eros that breaks the spell, it begins by acts of agape. She sees a goodness in him and loves that goodness, calls that goodness forth, and through that she falls into romantic love and establishes this new and better society. Now, this idea of loving somebody for a goodness that's inside of them and making that goodness come through has a long philosophical history. Most primarily, I think, in Plato's Socratic dialogue, Phaedrus, in which Socrates talks about how when a lover loves something in the beloved, what they love is actually the divine part of the beloved. And by loving the beloved, they draw the divine forth. They make the beautiful more lovable by loving them. He's talking about Eros there in Phaedrus, but the 5th century church father Augustine of Hippo gives us a very different version, a more Christian version. In his tractable on John 13, 34, and 35, he puts a particularly Christian spin on this. A new commandment I give you, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you are also to love one another. By this all people will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another. Now Augustine asks, how is this a new commandment? After all, way back in the 10 Commandments, God told us to love one another. And in fact, Jesus himself taught that the 2 greatest commandments were to love God and to love your neighbor. He even says in Matthew 22, on these 2 commandments depend all the law and prophets. So Augustine asks, what's the difference? And the answer he comes up with is looking at the clause, as I have loved you. For Augustine, this means it's a different type of love that's acting here. A different, other than just loving God because it's good or loving the neighbor because it's good, Jesus enacted a different type of love. For on the one hand, he that loveth God cannot despise his commandment to love his neighbor. And on the other, he who in a holy and spiritual way loveth his neighbor, what doth he love in him but God? That is the love, distinguished from all mundane love, which the Lord specifically characterized when he added, as I have loved you. For what was it but God that he loved in us? Not because we had him, but in order that we might have him, and that he might lead us on, as I said a little ago, where God is all in all. It is in this way also that the physician is properly said to love the sick. And what is it he loves in them but their health, which at all events he desires to recall, not their sickness, which he comes to remove? Let us then also so love one another, that as far as possible, we may by the solicitude of our love be winning one another to have God within us. And this love is bestowed on us by him who said, as I have loved you, that ye may also love one another. For this very end therefore did he love us, that we also should love one another, bestowing this on us by his own love to us, that we should be bound to one another in mutual love, and, united together as members by so pleasant a bond, should be the body of so mighty a head. So the love that Augustine is describing here is this. He's saying that when Christ loves us, what he loves is the image of God inside of us, the way that we are created in the likeness of God. And he loves us in such a way that that image of God, that God-likeness inside of us becomes more and more manifest, the more that he loves that element of us. He sees us not for the way that we are, but the way that we could and should be. And he commands us to love people the same way, which means that when we look at other people, we don't see them for what they are in the moment. We certainly don't see them for what they can do for us or what they have done for us. Rather, we see them in the way that Christ sees them, which is to say, he sees them as children of God, as creations of God. And by loving them in this agape love, loving them in this way that is not contingent upon what we can get from them or what they've done for us, we draw forth that God-like nature out of them. We make them more like God by loving them like God as revealed through Christ. This is central to establishing this kingdom of heaven. Again, all earthly communities are based on that type of power that we see illustrated by Gaston and by the villagers. This works best for me, therefore that's what we're going to do. And if you don't step in line with the way that I expect you to behave, then I'm going to punish you, I'm going to threaten you, I'm going to turn you into something else, I'm going to act like a beast, I'm going to destroy you. Jesus, as explained by Augustine here, is telling us something different. We love them and we transform them, and that's the way that our society works. And we see that longing here in Beauty and the Beast, and that's the type of hero that Belle ultimately becomes. By loving the Beast, not for what he's done for her, not for what he can do for her, but rather loving him for the person that she sees inside, and creating this new kingdom, we see very much the desire that gets articulated here in Augustine and described by Jesus in the book of John. That's a good thing for us Christians to think about, for imagining this sort of transformative love, one that can be free of the distortions of the world's power, and one that transforms that into something different, transforms the people into the images of God that they were created to be. Hi everybody, thank you so much for watching this week's video. I hope you found it interesting. If you did find it interesting, you might consider sharing it with somebody else that might get something out of it. Also, you might consider clicking the subscribe button over here. That way you'll be alerted every time I post a new video essay. While you're waiting for the next one, here are some older video essays that I've done that you might find interesting or useful. Also, if you have any ideas for some movies that I should cover on this series, I'd love to hear about them. You can either let me know in the comments below, or better yet, let me know via Twitter. My Twitter handle is @JAGeorgeII. At any rate, I hope you come back in a couple of weeks when I have the next video essay. Thanks for watching Renewed Mind Movie Talk.